Welcome to the Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We're excited to have you be a part of this important public process. Tonight, you will have the opportunity to address the commission on both non-agenda and agenda items. The agendas and speaker request cards are located in the back of the council chambers. You must fill out a speaker request card in order to address the commission. Please hand in your completed card to a city staff member. You may check the "I do not wish to speak" option on the card. This allows you to still voice your opinion on an item on the record without having to speak. In accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, please contact a staff member if you need any assistance. Public comment on a non-agenda item will take place during the citizen comment portion of the evening. These are items that don't appear on tonight's formal agenda. The commission secretary will call your name when it's time for you to speak. At that time, please approach the podium and tell us your name for the record. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes. The timer is on the screens visible from the podium. Note that you may also choose not to speak if other speakers before you have said what you wanted to say. Shouting, cheering, and loud noises will not be tolerated, and violators may be removed for disrupting the meeting. Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meetings stream live on YouTube and online at goodyearaz.gov. Follow the city's social media pages so you don't miss out on all that's happening in Goodyear. Thank you for coming to this meeting and being an active part of your city. And remember, it's a great time to be in Goodyear.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and fellow commissioners. The October 15th, 2025 Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meeting is called to order. Will you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the secretary please note the roll?
Chairman Clymer is present. Vice Chair Sambito is absent. Commissioner Nepomuceno is present. Commissioner Wang is present. Commissioner Hegedus is present on the phone. Commissioner Booth is present. Commissioner Roberts is present. We have a quorum. At this time, a vote shall be taken to excuse members unable to attend due to extenuating circumstances. Is there a motion and a second to excuse Vice Chair Sambito from the meeting?
Sorry, just a second. I don't like that.
I motion.
Give us 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, go ahead with your motion and second, please. I have a motion from Commissioner Booth and a second from Commissioner Roberts. Please enter your vote. Motion passes. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hegedus, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Clymer?
Aye.
Okay, so we're doing. Motion passes, thank you.
Now's the time for citizens who would like to address the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on non-agenda items. Are there any speaker cards?
I have none.
Does anyone in the audience wish to speak on a non-agenda item? Thank you. Agenda item number 1 is to approve the draft minutes from the last meeting. Will the secretary please read the recommendation?
Approve the draft minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting held on September 10th, 2025. Is there a motion and a second for the staff recommendation? We have a motion from Commissioner Nepomuceno and a second from Commissioner Roberts. Please enter your vote. Okay, Chairman Clymer, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Commissioner Hegedus, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, now this is an opportunity for convention members to disclose any ex parte communication they may have had prior to this meeting on any item scheduled for this evening's agenda. Ex parte communication is an outside communication commissioners may have had regarding items on tonight's agenda. Anyone? Okay. Okay, there is one public hearing meeting on the agenda tonight. As a reminder, the Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommendation board for council. The commission will vote on each item and forward the recommendation to council. Council makes the final decision. Agenda item number 2 is a use permit for a convenience drive-through. I'm going to open the public hearing. Planning Manager Christian Williams will present. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Clymer and the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Christian Williams, Planning Manager here with City of Goodyear. And I'm here before you this evening with a request from Ed Bull and Madison Leak on a use permit for a convenience use drive-through near Palm Valley Phase 5 called Palm Valley 10 Drive-Through. And I'm presenting on behalf of my colleague, Justin Gabrielson. The property that we will be discussing today is 1.86 acres. It's located on the northeast corner of Indian School Road and Saraville Avenue. That's in a center that is zone PAD, and the underlying zoning of that PAD is neighborhood commercial, which correlates to the city's C1 zoning district. Zooming out just a little bit, you can see that the site is just west of the Palm Valley Phase 5 community, just east of a recently completed McDonald's drive-through. It is just south of a vacant parcel within the larger neighborhood commercial center, and it's just north of the Pebble Creek community. And to the far west of the site, off screen slightly, you can see the beginnings of that UPS employment facility. For a little bit of history on the entitlement, in 2003, the property was initially entitled, which gave it its commercial entitlements there. And in November 2020, there were 2 use permits on a single night. One of the use permits was for a convenience use drive-through. That is the now open McDonald's restaurant. And just for a note, that case will actually come back before you in April of 26, or this spring, because of a condition of the approval that council placed on that. And I'll talk about that a little later. To the north of this, there was also a use permit that came in for a convenience use self-storage. That application has not been resubmitted, so at this point that use permit is expired. So the parcel's vacant, and if a convenience use were ever go on that site, it would need to come back before you again, potentially. So diving a little bit more into the site, the proposed convenience use is for a drive-through restaurant. As shown on this preliminary site plan, it'll be a restaurant which will consist of a 22-foot high building. It's approximately 10,000 square feet for the entire building, and it's actually a multi-tenant building which will contain 1 drive-through user on the far west end. More about the drive-through lane itself. That drive-through lane shows 9 spaces for vehicle queuing before the first stopping point, which is the menu board. That does exceed the city's minimum standard of 6 queuing spaces before the first stopping point. And then between the first stopping point and the pickup window, there are 4 spaces, which is right in alignment with the city's existing standard. The drive-through window and the speaker box both face west towards the McDonald's, and those are approximately 230 feet from the nearest residential that you can see to the east. The entry to the drive-through is 100 feet from the closest residential parcel. On this screen, you'll see the elevations for the multi-tenant building as a whole. The drive-through is on the left side of the building if you're looking at the top image, facing west. You'll see again the building is 22 feet in height, which is below the C1 underlying height allowance of 30 feet. The building faces south on that top image towards Indian School. In the middle image, that is what faces north towards the vacant lot that was initially planned to be storage. On the bottom left image, you'll see there are no windows on the side that faces the residential to the east. And on the bottom right image, you can see again the view that you'd have from the McDonald's looking at the drive-through window. A neighborhood meeting was held for this at the Goodyear City Hall for the proposed use permit. Actually, I will point out one more item here. The signage on this building are just placeholders. No tenants are a part of this action. So this action is just approving the use permit that allows the convenience use drive-through. We do know from the applicant that Starbucks is not the intended user. So again, any user can go in there. You're just approving a drive-through convenience use. A neighborhood meeting was held at the Goodyear City Hall for this use permit. 2 residents were in attendance. 1 resident was in opposition, citing the proximity of the speaker box to residential homes, potential of idling cars causing music noise entering when they're in their vehicles, property value concerns, potential for trash or rodents that might be around this restaurant, and their desire for sit-down restaurants and not drive-through operations in their neighborhood, as well as just the status of this commercial, which they believe should be neighborhood commercial. Another resident attended the meeting. They just had general development questions. There are several conditions of approval if this use permit were to be approved, and I'll highlight a couple of those. The restaurant will have to be designed in accordance with the zoning ordinance 4-2-18. One of the changes you'll see when it actually is built is that there will be a canopy to cover the drive-through to be in conformance. A maximum of 50% of that multi-tenant building may be occupied by the drive-through user. So it's a multi-tenant, so drive-through may not exceed 50% of the building. And as I mentioned earlier, that building could accommodate 3 or more tenants. Right now, they're planned 2, but this use permit does not restrict that number. The hours of operation for the drive-through restaurant will be restricted between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m. I'll remind you that that is similar to the McDonald's that was approved. The caveat is that when council approved the McDonald's, they did extend the hours of operations to midnight with a 1-year review. That review would require a public hearing again with this body and the council in order to codify that. So right now, the McDonald's hours are at a minimum 5 to 10. Deliveries will be restricted from this drive-through between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. That is similar to a convenience use located at Saraville and Yuma, which has this drive-through is closer to residential than that one. So we felt it appropriate to incorporate these stipulations here. The lighting restrictions are similar to McDonald's. The signs illuminating facing east are restricted, similar to other uses close proximity to residential. And similar to the McDonald's, you might recall there was an air scrubber stipulation that was added. If this drive-through user produces odors associated with food production, they would be required to install the air scrubber. If it is not for something that causes odor, they would not be required to do that. So from an administrative process, if a customer came in for tenant improvements and they indicated their use was food production or something that generates odor, our comment on the review would be you need to install the air scrubber, and that would be checked at the inspection process. And with that, those are high level, the stipulations and conditions of approval for this use permit. And again, staff's recommendation would be to forward a recommendation of approval with the conditions that were outlined in that document to council for their vote. Happy to take any questions if you
Hey,
have
question for staff. So we're seeing this because of the drive-through,
any. That is correct.
and that's one of these days, we're never gonna do that again?
Well, you see any drive-through that is located within 500 feet of
Okay.
residential per our
500
zoning
feet, all right, that's
code today.
that's the caveat.
Yes,
Okay, I got
unless their zoning says otherwise.
I got you. Okay, all right, all right. And the speaker boxes, I see pointed at the McDonald's parking lot. That's
Correct.
the way that goes. Okay. Anyone else for questions from staff? Would the applicant like to speak? Somebody said.
Hi, Christian. The entrance on this is from Indian School Road only, or also from Saraville?
That's a great question. I apologize for not addressing that. So when you look at the larger site, and this image is not updated, but if you see these pipes here, they convey water. There is an active turn lane on Indian School westbound into the existing McDonald's Center, where you would then access the pad for the proposed drive-through multi-tenant building and the McDonald's. There is also a drive-through, or a driveway off of Saraville Avenue, which would gain you access into the center for both users.
And I assume there'll be some buffering between the building and on the right side, the residential area?
Yes, With this approval, when they go to construct, they would finish out all of the landscaping between this pad and the residential. So there's like kind of like a drainage area to the west of the existing homes that's not landscaped today. This project, per stipulation, would be responsible to finish out the remainder of that landscaping for this portion of the site. The storage site would remain vacant because it's expired.
You want to add anything, Mr. Bull, or?
I'd like to introduce you to Madison Lee.
Okay,
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. For your records, Madison Leak with the law firm of Birch and Cracchiolo, and our address is 1850 North Central in Phoenix. Christian, as you guys know, always gives an excellent presentation. So I have a presentation that I'm happy to share with you if you like. If not, I'm happy to answer any questions. The client we're working on this with is Simon CRE. They're a very experienced real estate developer, and they acquire real estate as well. As Christian pointed out, this site has been zoned since 2003, quite a while. It's sat vacant all this time. So we're all very excited to see something move forward on this site, something that can benefit the neighborhood, something that can provide goods and services. Right now, they're anticipating a drive-through user, some type of coffee, and then they have one in the middle that could be something along the lines of juice bar, nail salon, something like that. And then they also have a Sherwin-Williams paint store, so that'll create jobs, make good use of this vacant site, and we're very excited. We appreciate staff's help, staff's recommendation, and with that, I will sit here for any questions. Thank you.
I noticed there's about the Sherwin-Williams. I guess I assume you have prior discussion already. That's why you put it in there.
With Sherwin-Williams?
With Sherwin-Williams.
That's correct. So their
Yeah,
intent is
because,
to lease the property.
That'd be nice because I know their operation is only 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for most of their locations, so that would be a plus.
I live near Sherwin-Williams, and I go there a lot because I'm always making my husband do projects on the weekends. And yes, it's a very nice to have near you.
Okay.
Kent, do you have any questions?
I do not. Kristen did a good job.
Okay, thank you. Are there any speaker cards?
We do not have any.
Okay, anyone in the audience like to speak on this agenda item? In that case, I'm going to close the public hearing. And would the secretary please read the staff recommendation?
Recommend conditional approval of the use permit for a convenience use drive-through restaurant on the subject property, subject to conditions of approval. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation or a motion to recommend denial of the staff recommendation? Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Booth and a second from Commissioner Wang. Please enter your vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Floor is open for commission discussion.
Anybody? I thought it was pretty well.
I don't have any comment against this thing. I just noticed, I'm just surprised that in their meeting with the resident, there's only one person. And I would think that with the row of residents there would be more residents either for or against that would voice their opinion. So it seems to me that this is pretty much acceptable to them, so.
Because McDonald's said yes. Yeah, like, before they were, the push that was McDonald's. Yeah, like, McDonald's said yes. Yeah, like, it might have been like, 24, we had a huge meeting about the McDonald's situation, and we heard all of the, likes and dislikes. So, I mean, to me, it just seems like, it's more, they're in a better situation now because of that.
Okay. All right, call for the vote.
Please enter your vote.
Aye.
Chairman Clymer?
Aye.
How do you vote? Thank you. Commissioner Hegedus, how do you vote?
I'm also an aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. The recommendation of approval will be forwarded to the City Council for the October 27th meeting.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is a business item. Agenda item number 3 is a work session to provide an update on the comprehensive update to the city's zoning ordinance. And as a reminder, all items listed are for discussion only. No action will be taken. Planning Manager Kristen Williams will be here to present.
Evening, Chairman and Planning and Zoning Commission. Name is Christian Williams, Planning Manager. And alongside me is Principal Planner Guadalupe Ortiz Cortez, who has been spearheading this project. And we also have with us Matt Kleisico. He is with Michael Baker International, and he is our consultant that we've hired to assist us with this great undertaking of rewriting the entire zoning ordinance. So we're here to give you a brief update. Well, I don't know if it's brief, actually. I said brief. We're here to give you an update on the status of updating the zoning ordinance and get directions on recommendations related to specific topic areas. So to tell you a little bit about why we are here, this update is directly related to the City Council's 2025 through 2028 strategic plan, which is to review and rewrite the entire zoning ordinance. The effort officially kicked off in January of this year. And to give a brief overview, we're going to talk to you about, give you a brief overview of what this slide is showing is, we've had some major milestones. We had our council one-on-ones where we got direction and guidance on topics they wanted us to explore. We had community workshop meetings in April at the Goodyear Recreation Campus. And then Matt was off to work starting to rewrite the ordinance and do analysis of that entire document. We've had development forums with our development community over a myriad of topics to get their feedback on items that we should address within the zoning ordinance update or consider addressing within that. And we're here now in October to have commission and council work sessions to provide you with that update. You can see we're on an 18-month timeline. The ultimate goal will be to come back for council action in June of 2026, which aligns with the strategic goal of having this completed by June of 2026. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt with Michael Baker International to go over the 4 areas that we'll be focusing on today.
Great. Excellent intro, Christian. So you can see on the slide here, we have 4 primary topical areas that we really want to discuss with you this evening. These talking or discussion topics were really derived through the community feedback when we went through the steps preliminarily for this project, as Christian outlined, and also through our analysis. So there's many topics that we could bring before you. These are not the only ones that we'll be focusing on, but the feedback you provide on these key topics will be used to help inform other parts of the code update process. So not only will your comments help inform these topical areas, but that feedback can be used in other parts of the code. So with that said, you can see we'll be first looking at enhancing noticing requirements. So we'll spend a little bit of time of capturing how does Goodyear address noticing for projects, what does state law require, and then explore any ways that we might enhance that to improve the process moving forward. Next, we'll be looking at permitted versus use permit uses. So we'll be strategically looking at just those uses in specific zoning districts, residential, commercial, industrial, those uses that require a use permit. And then ask ourselves, would there be situations where if we applied certain conditions to those uses, could they be permitted without a use permit process? Then from there, we'll take a look at opportunities for new housing. You might have heard Arizona has some housing challenges. And so we want to talk a little bit about housing and focus first on our agriculture and single-family residential districts. And so we'll explore not only the zoning districts, but what type of housing is allowed in those zoning districts to see if we might introduce maybe some different product types within those existing zoning districts to offer more opportunity for residents or future residents. And then last, we'll close on the temporary signage and multifamily. So this particular topic will look at what type of signage is allowed, what is the size, the duration, the placement of those, and determine if there's a need to explore other conditions that apply to temporary signage. We won't be getting into permanent signage. Those discussions are a little bit more defined, but temporary signage, we would be interested to hear your feedback. So with that, I'll turn it back over, or I'm sorry, I'll turn it over to Guadalupe to kick us off for our first topic.
Thank you, Matt. The city currently notices property owners within 500 feet of projects that require public hearings. That is, projects such as rezones, use permits, and special use permits. The notice and requirements include first, signs posted on the project site, usually along street frontages, and a postcard to notify property owners about a required applicant-led neighborhood meeting so that residents can learn about the project and voice their views on the project. Then, once the project is ready for public hearings, a newspaper advertisement is published. The signs are updated with public hearing information, and an additional postcard is sent to those property owners, notifying them of the public hearings. In the initial phase of the zoning ordinance update process, it was identified that residents desire enhanced public notification. They want to be more informed and engaged in the zoning and development process. And additionally, the Planning Commission and City Council have noted the importance of maintaining noticing practices that adequately inform residents and in turn support informed decision-making. And now I'll turn it over to Matt again to go over noticing requirements in more detail or recommendations for the zoning ordinance update to address resident and council concerns.
Great. Thank you, Guadalupe. I mean, that was a really great intro to just get our foundation of what does the city go through for its noticing efforts. But to give that a little more context, we have this initial table to capture some of those considerations relative to state statute. So while Goodyear goes through certain processes, Arizona Revised Statute does have some requirements as well. And so this table outlines how Goodyear's requirements align with those state requirements. So you can see sign posting, right? 15 days prior, pretty standard application across multiple municipalities. And of course, Goodyear aligns with that 15-day requirement. In terms of the newspaper postings that Guadalupe was noting, we have to post that once in a newspaper of general circulation, and Goodyear follows that requirement, of course. So you can see the one area that we do go above and beyond is the mailers or postcard notifications. State statute requires a minimum of 300 feet notification. Currently, the city of Goodyear applies a 500-foot distance requirement on that. So given that we have a little bit of a foundation now of how does Goodyear align with state statute, let's see how the city aligns with some of our other municipalities within the valley. So this slide is a great graphic that displays the comparison with some benchmark communities for Goodyear. And so on this slide, we see that notification distances for those postcard mailers. And the notifications range all the way, as you can see, from that minimum 300 feet up to a quarter mile, and even in some nuanced cases, a mile. And so as you see from the graphic here, the 300-foot Arizona at the top is state statute there. So you see multiple communities align with just the baseline 300 feet. Goodyear falls right above that at 500 feet. But then from there, you start to see maybe some repetitive icons for certain cities. For example, Glendale, because some cities will apply different distances for different size of projects. So depending on how many acres, Glendale will utilize a 600-foot notification, and then as the project gets larger, they look at 900 feet and then 1,200 feet. And if we have further discussion, we can talk about what those acreages are. But this graphic helps to display some of the comparables of how communities approach this. The other thing to make note of is for the city of Phoenix, while their notification boundary here is 600 feet, Their HOA, or I should say, their registered organization list. So any organizations that register with the city that are within a mile of that project get notified. So that is a little nuance for that particular one. So with that, I think we can jump now into looking more at how we might suggest adjusting some of those noticing requirements. So this slide just recaptures that initial table that we looked at. We see our sign posting, or that should discuss the sign postings as well as the project notification at 15 days, meeting minimum state statute, so there's no change there. The notice in a paper of general circulation, no change you can see there. But on the postcard notifications, we are suggesting that, as Guadalupe mentioned, to respond to some of the feedback we heard, to expand that notification distance of 500 feet to 600 feet, but consider also 1,200 feet for certain conditions, such as if a project were to take a parcel that is zoned residential and propose to rezone to non-residential, that those types, or in special situations, we might even do more enhanced notifications up to 1,200 feet. And then the last change or recommendation would be a direct HOA notice. So currently the city utilizes a same 500-foot policy to notify HOAs. But what we're suggesting is to actually expand that to 1,000 feet. And then that would allow those HOAs to disseminate that information to all of their residents as they see fit or appropriate. And it allows, a balanced way of expanding notification, but not being excessive on the number of mailers that go out. Now, that said, to give you a little bit of context to those suggestions, we do have this graphic for you. And this graphic shows, so I get these numbers right, I want to read off some of the numbers here. So we have our first graphic that shows the existing requirements at 500 feet, or notice the postcard mailers at 500 feet. In this example, that would consist of 81 properties for a cost of $112 to the applicant. The middle graphic, which aligns with that 600 feet, or expanding the notice area to that 600 feet, that would then capture 104 properties and have a cost of $144. And then, of course, the last graphic shows the 1,200 feet, if we were to consider that for select application types, and that would expand the notification up to 290 properties for a total of $400. And then we should make note that the city collects application fees up front, and so these costs would be captured in that process, and the applicant would absorb those in this situation. So at this point, that kind of summarizes the overall discussion relative to notifications, and we'd turn it back over to you, Chair, and fellow commissioners to share any feedback or comments you have relative to our talking points and/or recommendations.
I really made a comment, but I really like the, I like the recommendations for sure. It definitely adds on, keeps us in line with the other cities. So I'm looking for it.
Great.
Yeah, it's okay. I turned it off because I coughed. 8 or 9 months, this will all come to fruition, and we're going to see this again in about May for our commission. Is that right?
A great comment or question. That is correct, Chair.
Okay.
Based on the feedback we receive, we'll be having a work session with council on these same topics. We'll get feedback from them. That information will, of course, be used to make actual text edits to the zoning code. And before we go through the adoption process, we will absolutely be back before you to walk through final track
Your
changes.
community feedback that you're looking for, how do you gather that? Who do you notify to
Sure.
come and listen?
We have a project website, and we place all of the project information as it's developed onto the project website. But we've also utilized the site to have a community survey. We've also gone out and had our community workshop. So we put notifications out for residents to join us at an in-person workshop to get their feedback. And then as we get to certain milestones with drafts prepared, we'll put that material on the website for review, and then have continued public meetings in person to go over that information in more detail.
Just one question. Does the land area of a municipality affect the development of these distances? So in other words, like Goodyear is not a big area, area-wise, not a big city, area-wise, compared to other municipalities.
If you're asking if we notify individuals outside of our corporate boundaries?
No. In other words, if you compare Goodyear to Buckeye, for instance, so Buckeye, land mass is a bigger area-wise, right, than Goodyear. So therefore, in terms of development, there's not a whole lot of residential development compared to, they still have more vacant land, that's what I'm saying, compared to Goodyear. So when you apply the 500 feet versus the 600, you're not talking around that particular development. Many owners affected compared to where you have dense development surrounding that proposed, vacant land.
And we did look at our peer cities. For example, we're slightly smaller than Mesa in size, or Mesa's comparable in size to us. Buckeye is much larger, Phoenix is larger. So when we looked at those distances, we looked at what are all those communities doing? A lot of these communities where they are having rezone applications, other than like a Tempe, are in areas where, they are rapidly growing and reshaping the land. So it did take into account some of those factors, because a Buckeye or a Mesa might have some of those similar conditions. So we used an example, Pisern at Palm Valley, where it is in the middle of a developed neighborhood when we even analyze what the impacts of that would be.
Right.
But if you're developing, for example, down in the Sonoran Valley area of Goodyear, you might get, might be the same area, but less property owners, because you're impacting the immediacy of fewer property owners. Might be a handful of farmers at that point in time.
Okay, great. Just trying to understand the concept, so thank you.
Anyone else? I think it's great. Rolling on.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for that. We will turn it back over to Guadalupe to introduce our next topic.
Thanks again, Matt. Permitted versus use permit uses. The zoning ordinance contains a list of uses that are permitted in each zoning district. Those can develop on the site following typical development conditions for the zoning district in which they're located and following the typical administrative review process. But unlike permitted uses, there are a list of uses that the city has identified as needing an additional permit process in order to develop in a specific zoning district. Those are the use permit and special use permit applications. During that additional permit process, staff identifies conditions for that proposed use, and those use permits and special use permits, as you recall, are presented to the Planning Commission and City Council for approval of the project. During the council one-on-ones and as stated in the city's strategic plan, there is a desire to streamline development processes where possible. And as part of this update, we are looking at special use and use permit projects that may be considered to be permitted conditionally based on context, location, or performance standards And that way we are able to remove that additional permit process. And as may be identified during this update process, and now Matt will discuss the current and recommended use permit uses in each zoning category.
Great, thank you, Guadalupe. So here we have, first up, our current residential permitted versus use permit uses. So what you see on this particular slide, within the residential zoning districts, these are the uses that require a use permit. Now, these uses, as you may look at the list, obviously do have unique impacts or require additional oversight, hence the original intent of having an additional layer of review. So these particular uses require that extra step at this point in time in our residential districts. Now, we recommend some possible changes of those uses that could, with proper guidance, allow for these ones shown in yellow to be changed from requiring a use permit to be allowed in that zoning district with specific considerations. So for example, on an assisted living facility, we somewhat know in advance what the challenges are with those types of developments. We can anticipate that they might have more trips associated with them. They might have emergency vehicles that need to access them. And so those facilities, because we know some of the standard or typical conditions, might present themselves to being allowed if we have considerations in the code already captured. So that might be an example of providing a requirement that assisted living have to be located on specific types or classifications of roadways or in a proximity to a certain classification. It might consider the separation of these so that we don't get a concentration of them all next to each other. They might have to have distance requirements. They might look at other safety considerations relative to access for emergency vehicles. So it's those types of things that and considerations that we could apply to a hospital in this particular case, or an agricultural stand, and just remove that extra step as Guadalupe presented and possibly improve the development process, but still maintain the controls that the city would like to ensure that these uses are compatible when placed. So with that, I'll move on to our next topic, which is commercial. I'll go through commercial and then industrial, and then we can pause at the end to see if you have any specific comments. But here we have the same approach, but focusing on our commercial districts. So these are uses that require a use permit currently in the zoning code. And if we look at some potential revisions to that, we would suggest or recommend that with proper considerations, we could control and allow limited outdoor display in conjunction with specific types of retail. We could properly place veterinary hospitals, daycare, outdoor seating, and studios for the practice and sale of fine arts. The last slide that I'll present, of course, is the current industrial uses. So all of these use types listed are required to get a use permit in industrial zoning districts. In industrial zoning districts, we have maybe a wider variation of considerations because of the variation in types of uses. So you can see how there's a lot more on the industrial than maybe you see in some of the other zoning districts. And that's obviously to make sure that we maintain those checks and balances. The other thing that I would note on this particular slide, we do show that through this update process, we will be refining some of these use types or the list of uses. And so one example would be adding battery energy storage systems or BESS systems. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So here's some recommendations that we might think about for industrial. As you can tell, we're really only identifying one particular one, and that's a dwelling for a watchman or caretaker employed on a premise in an industrial area. Again, all of the other uses for specific considerations, we find it applicable to maintain that added layer of review. Now, the one thing I'd clarify here, we're not at a position to provide a recommendation on BESS facilities, but it's highlighted there because it is top of mind and one that's being considered for the project, but we'll be bringing forward more discussion on that in future presentations. So with that, I will pause to see if there's any questions or comments from the commission about these particular recommendations or any suggestions you have about concerns or possible modifications to these recommendations. And I can bounce back to residential or commercial if needed.
You had daycare on the previous slide, right? As recommended, permitted, but this one doesn't, you don't recommend it in this last slide.
Which use, I'm sorry?
I thought there's
Daycare.
daycare, right?
Yes, in the industrial setting, we would recommend that because you can see some of the complexities of the other use types that might be allowed in an industrial setting, we would want some probably additional consideration to make sure that we don't allow a daycare in an area that isn't appropriate adjacent to a more intensive use, or place a daycare and then possibly create an impact to a use, a future use.
Just curious, when was the last time you ever dealt with a tannery, and what is that use? Is that what I think it is?
Very good. We will, that's spot on in terms of some of the terminology that we'll be modernizing with this update. So don't find too many tanneries around here these days. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, not hearing any other comments. Thank you for that. We will then move ahead and turn it over to Christian to introduce our next topic.
Thank you. Our next topic tonight we'll focus on is the opportunities to expand and diversify housing options within Goodyear's zoning framework. As outlined in the strategic plan, one of the city's or the council's goals is to provide current and future residents with a variety of housing types, prices, sizes, and ownership types. In order to assist in accomplishing this, we're working on expanding the housing product types within existing residential zoning districts. As part of the legislation that was passed by the state over the last couple of years, the city has completed a housing study at the end of calendar year 2024. The study was done by a reputable group, the Elliott Pollock and Company, and that study concluded that the city currently exceeds the demand for housing, both in terms of single-family and multi-family housing categories. You can see some of those highlighted words on the screen. Based on the great work of this commission and the council, and working with the private development community, the foreseeable 5 years shows that we have the land and product diversity available to absorb our share of regional demand and support the diversified employment growth in the city and the region are experiencing. This also allows the workforce to live close to employment and not have to drive to our neighboring cities for those opportunities. I'll also mention that you will be seeing a zoning ordinance text amendment come before you in November to address the middle housing components that the state is requiring cities to provide. So again, we're right now trying to be proactive in addressing these housing issues so that we're not reactive, and so that hopefully the state sees the work that we're doing as a city to manage our own housing supply, so that we're not seeing legislation targeted at cities for doing nothing. And as part of this conversation, I'd also like to show you that the past several years of rezonings, plattings, and permitting has resulted in housing growth. This chart on the left shows 2017 on the far left through 2024, and then the far right is the first half of the 2025 calendar year. These are the units coming online and being finalized by our building safety professionals and permitting professionals, and that allows new families to move into our community. What you'll notice is that the diversity of our housing options has shifted solely from being single-family detached, largely in 2017, to a wide mix of housing options, as you'll see as we got to a close of 2024 and halfway through 2025. So despite some economic shifts over the past years, Goodyear is still experiencing confidence in the market and as such delivering a broad variety of housing product. Some of the recommendations you'll see are as a result of the housing study and also a housing study that was conducted by a grant we received by the Maricopa Association of Governments. That's been provided in your packet. But the report is part of some of the recommendations that you're going to hear from us tonight as it relates to increasing that housing stock and allow more middle housing options or missing middle housing options so that there are more ownership opportunities and things of that nature so that we don't lose the talent that grow up in our Goodyear schools and communities. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt to go through some of our recommendations and talk about housing types.
Great.
Oops.
We doubled up there. Thank you, Christian. So to dive into this, we want to give you a little foundation like some of our prior topics. So as Christian outlined, as housing needs evolve, it's important that our code support a range of those residential formats so that we can respond to those changing demographics, respond to the affordability challenges, and just align with lifestyle preferences, right? So as with the prior discussions, we want to first take or establish a foundation for you. And this slide shows the current residential use types that are allowed in Goodyear's agriculture and single-family zoning districts. So those are the areas that we're going to focus our discussion on this evening. We won't be looking or getting into multifamily. It's just focusing on those agriculture and single-family zoning districts. So the type of residential uses the current code considers are listed on the left-hand side or the first column. And then the specific agriculture and single-family zoning districts that we want to focus on or where those residential use types are allowed are listed on the right-hand side. So not every residential type that you see on the left is allowed in every zoning district on the right. And so what we're going to do is walk you through those different residential types, give our recommendations about how we might modify that, and then show you a table that outlines kind of how all that comes together. So first up, we have our one single-family detached product type. This type of housing is typically built on individual lots and has no shared walls between units. It's the most common residential form within Goodyear and generally found in densities that range from 1 to 8 dwelling units to an acre. These homes are usually site-built, could be modular where their parts are built off-site and then put together on site. But the ownership model for this is pretty straightforward. You typically own the house and own the land that the house sits on. The placement is on the ground and there's no units above you, right? So there is no shared vertical space. This residential type, as you can see on the slide, is currently allowed in all of the agriculture and single-family zoning districts except the R1A zoning district. And so for this update, as you can see, we're not suggesting any changes to where one single-family detached homes are allowed right now. Now, we go to one single-family attached. So this product type typically includes 2 to 4 units that share walls but are individually owned and placed on separate lots. You'll see examples here ranging from 2-unit townhomes to 4-unit configurations. So the 2 images on the top show a situation where the garages connect, right? On the image on the left, and the image on the right shows where it's a 2-story and it has a common wall between both. But in these situations, the homes are generally fall within a 6 to 16 dwelling units per acre. They're also typically site-built. Residents will typically own both the unit and the land that it sits on. So even though they're attached, they still typically have ownership of the unit itself and the land that it sits on. These units are placed on the ground and not, as we would call, stacked, which means that they don't have any units above them or share any vertical space. This residential type is only allowed in the R1A zoning district right now. So you would have to, in essence, have this specific zoning classification to develop these types of products. So as you can see from the slide, what we're suggesting or recommending is that we allow 2-unit attached in the R14 and R16. So not necessarily taking it all the way to allowing 3 or 4 or plus units, but the 2-unit attached could be a use type that would be appropriate in the R14 and R16. And then consider all of these attached types within the R2 district. And again, we'll have a table at the end that kind of brings this all together. So next up, we have our 2-family duplex. This is a slightly different now. The duplex product, this housing type typically includes 2 units within a single building, either side by side or stacked. So on the images there, you see the one on top has a single building with 2 entrances on either side of a single-story building, whereas the image on the bottom actually is a stack configuration where 1 unit is on the ground floor and another unit is above that. This type of development typically ranges from 6 to 10 dwelling units to an acre. It's site-built, and ownership can vary. Some are individually owned, while others may be structured as condominiums. So you might just own the unit above you, whereas others you might own the actual unit on the ground there. In terms of placement, duplex units may be built on the ground or stacked depending on the design and site constraints. Currently, the 2-family duplex is only allowed in the R2 district. So that's important to keep in mind when we're talking about recommendations, because the prior slide we mentioned that the attached product might be appropriate in this zoning district, because right now it only allows just this one type of residential product. From here, we're not necessarily recommending any change to the R2 except for those particular additions that I mentioned on the prior slide. Now here, we're looking at a potential new product type. So for this discussion, this slide introduces the triplex and fourplex, or dwelling units with more than 2 units. And so that's why you see the more than 2 family. So the last one was 2-family, a duplex. Now this is looking at what if you had a product type that had more than that. So densities for this product type range from 6 to 16 dwelling units to an acre. These units are also site-built. They may be individually owned or structured as condominiums depending on the development model. Units can be built on the ground or stacked depending on site constraints and design preferences. So these examples, just to give you context, the top image is a triplex. It's a little small and hard to see, but the bottom floor there has three doors that lead into the three individual units. And they all have their independent access, right? The bottom image actually is a fourplex, but this is a little unique in that this fourplex actually has one entrance, a common entrance, and then you go into a little lobby, and then you have your four doors to each unit. These do have some comparables that there's some projects in the city, Deer Run and Village at Rio Paseo, that align with this product type, and those were developed through a PAD process. And so the consideration is there a way that we can allow this product type with not having to go through a whole PAD process? Given that this product type is not a particular use type in the current zoning code, you can see that there's no comparables there. While this is a product type that we think could be introduced to the zoning code, we'll also comment that this does start to get a little bit more dense in character when applied in multiple situation, or if multiple types are placed adjacent to each other. So we do feel that this product type is a little bit more appropriate for the multiple family zoning districts. So we want to at least introduce this product type to you this evening, but you'll see from our table that we're not recommending to introduce this to any of the single family unless the commission has any suggestions or feelings about that. So the last product type that I'll introduce is manufactured homes. I think we're all generally familiar with manufactured homes, and they've come a long way, right? Since some of our maybe older views of manufactured homes, they had a different character and feel, but the images you can see here on this slide, that manufactured homes can look like a site-built home on the top there, or an even maybe more traditional applications can have many embellishments that make it a very acceptable housing type. Now, these are typically found in ranges of densities from 1 to 12 dwelling units to an acre. They're, of course, built off-site and then placed on the particular site. Manufactured homes are generally owner-occupied, where the residents either own or lease the home. Units are placed, of course, on the ground. There's no situations of stacking a manufactured type of product. These uses are currently not allowed in any of the agriculture or single-family zoning districts. They have their own dedicated districts. But for this update, we are recommending that because of some of the enhancements in this product type, that it could be appropriate if it met design standards that the city already administers within our agricultural zoning categories. And the logic behind that is just looking at some of those more rural areas of the community and recognizing that if they have a desire to place a manufactured home in a rural area, that we expand some of that flexibility for them. And so with that, we'll take a look at this table, which outlines what is currently allowed in all of those zoning districts that we just discussed, as well as the product types that are listed in the zoning code for residential. So you can see that the zoning classifications are across the top, the use types are along the side, and the X's represent where the specific product type is currently allowed. So as we mentioned, the manufactured home is not allowed in any of the agriculture or single-family zoning districts, but it is allowed in other districts. And then, for example, multiple dwelling or multifamily residential, of course, is also not allowed in agriculture or single-family residential. So that's why you don't see any X's there. Now, based on our conversation, this is a enhancement of that table to capture some of those changes that we discussed, as well as some of those new product types. So you see the black X's there are maintained in most part, but we've added some green X's to capture where we're making recommendations about possibly expanding the product types in certain zoning districts. So again, for example, under the one single family attached, that is a broad use type right now in the zoning code, and it's allowed only in the R1A attached. But if we were to develop guidelines that can control and allow, for example, up to 2 units attached, that could possibly be allowed in an R16 or R14 because it could have a more suburban feel if it's done in a proper way. Whereas if you get more units connected, 3 units or 4+ units, we start to recognize that that might get too dense for a R16 or R14, so we're not recommending that. But we are recommending that they are all allowed in the R1A as it's currently allowed. The other examples show where attached products could be introduced to the R2, the 2-family zoning district, given that that's already allowing duplexes, that it is a opportunity to expand that. And the other consideration, again, is that manufactured home, allowing that in the agriculture zoning districts. So again, the notion here is to look at the existing zoning districts and see how we might expand them from that single use type or allowing a single type of product and giving some flexibility, but controlling the look, character, and feel of those districts. So with that, I will turn it back over to the commission for questions or any concerns that you might have with these recommendations.
Just a quick question on the manufactured home. I assume if this is adopted that there will be additional restrictions to follow.
And correct. Currently, the zoning code does have some considerations for manufactured homes, but in addition to those considerations, we also have design requirements that housing must meet. And so it would be our expectation that those same design requirements that we would apply to a single-family stick-built home would apply to manufactured homes. And so we would hold it to the same standard, but in essence, just allow a different construction type, if you will. If you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I was thinking that myself, so thanks.
I've seen some manufactured homes on wheels, you know.
You want to take, yes.
Our design guidelines would not allow somebody to currently wheel a house there and leave it unskirted. So if you all had an interest in us looking at allowing that product type on those 1-acre lots, 5-acre lots, and larger, we would evaluate what additional conditions would need to be on manufactured homes to ensure that they looked and felt like the rest of the neighborhood.
I wouldn't allow that.
Okay, no further questions? Follow on.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair. I'll turn it back over to Christian, I think, for our last topic.
Thank you. So we'll shift to our final topic, which is temporary signage specifically in multifamily zoning districts. This topic has surfaced as an area needing clarification and potential updates, particularly by the development community, and specifically members of the Goodyear City Council, through their one-on-one conversations with city leadership, have asked staff to further look into this topic and look at how we compare to other cities as it relates to temporary signage in multifamily districts. Before I get into the topic, I want to give you a high-level look at multifamily within Goodyear. Based on outreach from our Friends Within Neighborhood Services Division to our apartment and multifamily housing communities, we know that a majority of our housing complexes that are multifamily in Goodyear have a median occupancy rate of 95%, meaning that less than 5% of the units are vacant. That's great news as it relates to us being able to attract our workforce and provide housing to our workforce and those that are looking for different housing options within Goodyear. As you will also potentially recall from a presentation our director Katie Wilkin did several years ago, and as evident by our housing mix charts that you saw on the previous slide, back in 2015, only 9% of our total housing supply within Goodyear was multifamily. And at that time in her presentation in 2021, about 13% of the housing supply was multifamily. And she had a prediction in the presentation, which actually did come to fruition. In 2025, about 18% of our total housing stock within Goodyear is multifamily. Now that we've reviewed both of the issues and how Goodyear standards compare regionally, we'd like to discuss and explore the changes that might be made to address this topic. So I'll turn that over to Matt.
Great. Thank you again for teeing that up for me. And so getting into this topic, we really wanted to make sure we address a few key issues, and those are identified on this slide. So as we're talking about temporary signage, we're looking at what is this signage being used for, right? And so we're acknowledging that it's advertising leasing, it's advertising grand openings, it's other events that it's considering. So we want to be mindful of that. We also want to recognize the types of signage that is being utilized. So we have A-frame signs that might be a consideration. We have banners on the side of buildings that are a consideration. So those are the different types of situations that we want to be mindful of when we're establishing or making such recommendations. And then the third that we were looking at is how are these signs placed? How long is something temporary until it becomes permanent? And then, of course, are there any safety or visibility issues with this signage? And so it really is an important topic and one that is brought up fairly frequently in other communities we work in regarding temporary signage. And so as we have done on some of our other topics, we wanted to first give you a foundation of how does Goodyear currently treat temporary signage. So this slide shows that from a size standpoint, temporary signs are generally limited to 32 square feet or less. The placement of signs must not interfere with pedestrian or vehicle movement and cannot be placed within designated site visibility triangles, which helps to, of course, maintain safety in those line of sights. The duration, as you can see in the table, identifies that these signs are allowed to be displayed for 10 to 30 days, depending on the type and purpose of the application of the sign. And certain types of temporary signs do require a permit, especially if they exceed standard size or duration limits. So you can see there's some baseline conditions, but there is some flexibility there. And so that gives a foundation on the city. What we now want to talk about is our benchmark communities. This can get very nuanced, right? So we didn't want to get into a lot of slides showing all the various regulations, but this has a summary of when we looked at our benchmark communities and we associated size, we were on par with most all other benchmark communities in terms of that 32 square feet or less. So green check mark there. From a duration standpoint, Goodyear allows signs to be, as I mentioned, displayed for 10 to 30 days. Some communities or cities do allow up to 30 or 60 days, depending on that sign type. But overall, the city, again, was comparable from a temporary standpoint. That's the kind of aspect that we always want to emphasize when we're talking about temporary signs, is that they're intended to be for a moment in time, not permanent. Placement. Requirements across the region are similar. Signs must not interfere with pedestrian or vehicle movement, must stay out of visibility triangles, and maintain safety. And then from a permitting standpoint, like other cities, Goodyear requires permits for certain temporary signs, especially those that exceed those size standards. So, long story short is Goodyear is fairly aligned with our benchmark communities when we're looking at temporary signs. And there's some more language or guidance in your handouts if you wanted to look at some of those examples that I was referencing. But overall, I would clarify that we're not proposing to make any changes to the temporary sign conditions. The current code does give some flexibility, but does have some alignment with other communities. But this slide does emphasize why it is top of mind with us in terms of the examples of temporary signs that end up becoming permanent. And of course, enforcement comes into play on that, but Goodyear does a great job on that. And so we want to make sure that they have the regulations to maintain that. So with that, I'll pause to see if the commission has any questions or suggestions relative to temporary signs or even situations that you might have come across that would be informative to us.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I see these pictures of the ones that have been up for a long time, and it doesn't look good. And then once they're there for a while, then people think that, well, that's the way it goes. That's the way they're supposed to be, which is not good.
Yeah, we clarify these are not projects in it or applications in the city, but we would want to make sure that it does not become getting taken advantage of or something that becomes commonplace. So it improves the aesthetic quality of the community. And as Christian outlined, in certain applications, especially multifamily, occupancy is good. And so, the permanent signage should be, in most instances, applicable and not need additional signage. So unless you have any other feedback?
Christian answered my question the last meeting. So, and I said, prove me wrong. And he just proved me wrong that we don't have a glut of apartments here or what. So with 95%, that was good news. So I admit that. So that was pretty good. And in my driving around the city, I really haven't seen any outrageous sign regarding this multifamily thing. So in fact, some of them you could hardly see them. You'll miss it because they're not that big, So that was pretty good.
The most eye-opening thing we learned in this was our code enforcement does a great job keeping our city looking beautiful, and probably need to call my own city's code enforcement department because one of the pictures is on my drive home. So, so with that, I just want to thank you. This concludes our presentation for today, and you all have been here for an hour and 20 minutes. So thank you for your time. We greatly appreciate that. We greatly appreciate the insight and helping us move forward with some of the topics. I do want to acknowledge we threw a lot at you in the last hour in 20 minutes. So if you're at home and you're looking through these materials, you have a question, you think of an idea, you're looking at the list and something comes to mind, don't hesitate to send myself or Katie, our director, an email, or Alyssa an email. We are happy to look into something, get you some information back, or have Matt and his team take a look at that. So we just really appreciate your time as we're working through this. And again, our touch points will be probably closer to spring for some more updates and some more robust content coming out. But
Yeah, we look forward to the community feedback and see what they have to say about these things.
So this chart you use, are they on the website or?
they are public documents. Everything that y'all have in your packets are public because they are in the agendas and minutes. So if anyone's listening at home and wants to know what is in those packets, they're available on our Goodyear website. If you search minutes and agendas and go to the meeting for today, it'll be, there's a lot of attachments that have the housing studies, the multifamily signage, all the crazy graphs that wouldn't fit on a PowerPoint, so. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Are there any staff communications?
Thank you, Chairman. An update on the last item. At your last meeting, you considered a rezoning request for Community 14 in Estrella, which was recommended for approval by this commission by 5-1 vote, and City Council did approve that rezoning case. I also wanted to give you an update that at the last meeting, it was requested that we have some subject matter experts on transportation planning and the traffic review coming to the meeting to provide information. And because of the item tonight, we didn't schedule it for tonight, but we are working to have them at the next meeting so that we can do a learning session with lots of questions and answers. So we look forward to have that in November. And that's all I have.
Okay, and the next meeting will be, I'm trying to get to my page here. How did I lose my place? When is the next meeting? November the 5th. That's when it's gonna be. November 5th in the same room at 6 p.m. And if there's no further agenda items or anybody wants to speak, we're done.